Welcome back to She Can, where women lead by example by telling their stories, all their insights and experiences of how they got to where they are today, to show others and guide others, support others on their journeys, because it's easier to be what you can see. I am super excited to talk to an amazing woman today, Shannon Watts. Shannon, welcome to She Can. You are a mom of 5 and you founded Moms Demand Action in 2012. It started with a Facebook post about ending gun violence after the Sandy Hook shooting and turned into the biggest movement of Americans fighting for public safety measures that protect people from gun violence. You have 11 million supporters, a chapter in every state, and are part of the Every Town for Your Safety. Moms Demand Action is now run by somebody else, Angela Farrell Sabala, and we're going to talk about how you pass that torch on to somebody else. Shannon, you're also the author of Fired Up, which comes out on the 17th of June. You're the founder of the Firestarter University, which you'll tell us more about. You're a speaker, organizer, and board member of Emerge America that supports women to get elected, to build a women-led America, one candidate at a time. Fired Up is a guide to harness your potential, live without fear, and come alive at any age for women to become fire starters. You have a Substack called Playing with Fire and also a podcast of the same name. You were called or are called the summoner of women's audacity, which I love. You are one of the Time Magazine's 100 most influential people, a Forbes 50 over 50 change maker, and Glamour Woman of the Year. Shannon, you are one of these incredible women that have done so much. Tell us a little bit more about your journey and how you got to where you are today, those pivotal points that led you to where you are today.
Well, thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. I grew up in upstate New York, and it's a place where a lot of civil rights and suffragists passed through, the activists who were working on those things. And we were really taught by our teachers to admire them and to see them as heroes. And I think that was very formative for me as, I became an adult. And I was obsessed with Watergate as a teenager, which is sort of strange, but I read pretty much everything there was to know about it. And it made me want to be an investigative journalist like those at the Washington Post. And I went to journalism school, and I kind of got derailed when I graduated from college because my parents divorced after 26 years of marriage. I was an only child. And looking back now, I can see that I married my college boyfriend in a way to create a new family, to have some stability. And that just sent me in a totally different trajectory. I ended up in a career I really didn't expect in public relations. I had 3 kids by the time I was 30. And in my mid-30s, I found myself in a career and frankly a marriage that was not fulfilling to me. Some choices I made along the way that I needed to undo. And I didn't really realize it until I found myself in the emergency room covered head to toe in eczema and not being able to cure it. And the doctor said to me that what was happening was a reaction to stress. I was essentially, burning myself from the inside out. And I began to journal at that point. I couldn't afford a therapist. I obviously couldn't confide in my husband. And it really created a roadmap forward for me to figure out, first of all, what was next. And that included dismantling my marriage and leaving my job and kind of starting over. But it also helped me realize, once I was able to figure out who I was and what I wanted, that there was a formula for figuring that out. And I've watched, thousands and thousands of other women do the same through Moms Demand Action and through my work in helping women run for office. And so that's really what this book is all about.
Shannon, I wonder, what do you feel has really contributed to the success of Moms Demand Action? It was it was grassroots. I mean, it started with a post on Facebook, right? So tell us a little bit when you thought that there is something happening and I'm onto something.
It was right away. I was at my home folding laundry outside of Indianapolis on a very cold winter day, saw that there was a mass shooter inside an elementary school. And like so many other people in America and across the world, was just devastated as I watched the news that 20 children and 6 educators had been killed.
Mm,
And I went to bed in tears and just distraught. And some point during the night, that sadness turned into just outrage. And I felt like I had to do something. And, I had been very inspired by Mothers Against Drunk Driving, which was
mm,
influential in my teens in the 80s. This group of pissed off moms and women changed the laws around drinking and driving in this country under a decade, which is really significant, especially back in the day when there was no social media. And so that was the template that I was looking to. And I went on Facebook. I created a new Facebook page. This was in 2012, and Facebook was very popular with middle-aged women. And it was like lightning in a bottle. The
mm,
amount of people who started DMing me and calling me and texting me and saying, I want to do this where I live. And I had a certain set of skills. When I talked about this formula for figuring out what makes you come alive, I was 41 years old. And I realized that my abilities, my values, and my desires were coming together. It was sort of a
mm,
perfect storm. My abilities were this decades long career in corporate communications that helped me figure out how to create a brand and shape a narrative. My values were a desire to protect my family, my community, my country. And my values were coming together and doing that in a community with other badass women, right?
mm,
And suddenly I just had this influx of people who wanted to help me and bring their skill sets to the table. And I should be clear, I don't just mean people, I mean women,
yeah.
mothers, women who walked out of their jobs the day of the Sandy Hook school shooting and never went back and
Mm,
volunteered full time for years, just like me. I was a full time volunteer for over a decade. So I think what made it successful was that so many like minded women came together in a moment of pain and grief and decided that if we lose our children, we have nothing left to lose. We aren't going to back down or be intimidated by gun extremists. We are going to organize and take on the wealthiest, most powerful special interest that's ever existed, and we did.
yeah. And you did very successfully. And then you passed on the baton in 2022 when something important happened. What happened then?
Well, every year I asked myself, is it time to step back? Because I believe power is finite. I didn't want this to be everything I did for the rest of my life. I
Yeah.
wanted to do it. I never imagined I'd do it for 11 years, but I feel like women have, maybe because we haven't had power, we are better at managing it and giving it away.
Mm,
And so each year when I'd ask myself that, I would say no, because there was legislation coming up or there had just been a shooting tragedy. There were all these reasons I had for staying. And then in 2022, after the shootings in both Uvalde and Buffalo, legislation that I honestly thought had no chance of passed the Congress, and also the president signed it into law. And that was shocking. We had 15 Republican senators who voted for this legislation, in large part because we had created this unstoppable army of angry women who just were not going to tolerate the inaction of our mostly male lawmakers. And so I was standing in the Rose Garden with President Biden when he was signing this bill into law, and I just felt, whether it was a voice or an intuition, it was just saying to me, this is the bookend to your activism. And that was in the summer of 2022. By the end of the year, I told my team I was leaving. And I spent all of 23 saying goodbye. And then I stepped away and I handed the baton over to someone who has, much different experience than I do and will bring new energy and ideas to the organization.
yeah. Shannon, I love that, and you talk about this more often than just now. You've been talking about this. We shouldn't hold on to powers and positions forever. We have to be able to pass on the torch when it's time to infuse it with new energy, new people, new experiences. What was it like for you to step into the next phase of your journey. I mean,
Mhm.
tell us a bit about those feelings, because I understand we often know it's time, but it's still hard. This was,
Oh,
you got five
yes.
children, but this is a baby. This is something that you grew from nothing to 11 million supporters across America. I mean, it's massive.
Mm. Early on, a woman from Silicon Valley said to me, she was a volunteer, whatever you do, don't get founder syndrome. And
Mm,
I said, oh, of course not. I had no idea what she's talking about. So I had to go home and Google it. And it basically, it's this idea that when someone founds something, their identity becomes so enmeshed with it that it's very difficult to walk away. And when they do, either the organization ends because it can't exist without them, or they burn it down on purpose because they can't exist without it.
yeah.
And I'm a practicing Buddhist, and I thought, okay, well, this will be a great way to manage my ego. Can I
Mm,
extract myself eventually from this without hurting the organization or myself, frankly? And I knew there would be a lot of suffering. And so I made a whole plan with friends and family and my therapist to think about what would it be like to, after 11 years, say goodbye to an identity that I had had and
mm,
that had become kind of all encompassing. And certainly, there were times that I wanted to take back my decision to leave, or I regretted it, or I really struggled. And it was sort of an exercise. It was like so many things in life, a practice.
mm,
And I didn't do it perfectly, but I did it. And and what it taught me was, there people keep saying to me all the time, like, oh, how wonderful that you found your life's work. And no, gun violence prevention is not my life's work. It was a fire in my life. I want to have
mm,
many more. I'm 54 years old. Like,
yeah.
it's not the end. It's a beginning in many ways. I can take a lot of the things I learned and the people I met, um, and the skills, it goes back to this formula of values, abilities, and desires. How do I do that? How do I keep that practice going so that I can create more fires in my life and in the life of others? And for me, that was writing this book.
Yeah.
It was, I've gone back to school to study genealogy, which is something that fascinates me. I'm an empty nester, and I'm doing more travel
Mm.
than I was able to do with mom. So I just think we should see the second half of our lives as a new beginning, an opportunity for a lot of different chapters.
Yeah. Shannon, and we live in times where we need more women to step into the ring,
Yes.
into the public sphere. And you do that as part of your Emerge America. You are very interested in women who come alive through activism and community. And so tell us more about this next phase and your new book that's coming up in June. It's available for pre-order now. So people run, don't walk to order it. Tell us a bit more about the process of writing it, and what does the next phase look like for you?
I was just had decided to step back from Moms Demand Action. I was running on my treadmill one night, and I got a call on my phone. It said Maria Shriver, and I didn't know Maria. We followed each other on Instagram, and she'd always been a supporter of Moms Demand Action. And she said, "I have a book in print. I would love for you to write a book." And I said, "Oh wow, okay. What about?" And she said, "Whatever you want." And I thought, okay, when will I have that opportunity again in my life? And I began the process of writing this book again, which is about the formula that women can have for coming alive. And what I realized in writing the book and interviewing over 70 women from all walks of life,
Mm,
right? Everyone from famous women like Mika Brzezinski and Stephanie Ruhle to women who are teachers and um, who are leaders in their own community. And
yeah.
over and over again, the pattern is women are taught to fulfill their obligations and men are taught
Mm,
to follow their desires.
yeah.
And what if we lived our lives with the question always in our mind's eye of what do I want?
Mm,
Because that would completely change the way we live. And look, women don't not do that because they're weak. It's because they're wise. The system is set up against us to do that.
yeah.
If women ask themselves simply, what do I want all the time? Government systems would fail,
Mm,
institutions would topple, family systems would fall apart. Like there's a reason that we are kept in check.
yeah.
And I just don't want any woman to get to the end of their life and feel like they didn't burn, especially in this
Mm,
generation when menopause is just a new beginning, not an ending. And so the book process itself was obviously hard. Anyone who will tell you who wrote a book, it is very hard work. It's taxing, you're sitting a lot, you're looking at blank pages, but also I was so inspired by the stories that I was hearing
mm,
from other women. I'm very proud of the book. And now that I'm sort of putting this out into the world, which is sort of like giving birth all over again at age 54, I'm kind of not sure what's next for me. I have a lot of people ask me if I'm going to run for office. I never say never, but I want to get this book out into the world. And as you said at the beginning of the call, as sort of a summoner of women's audacity, that's what I'm so passionate about, whether it's encouraging women to run for office or have that difficult conversation or just simply ask themselves, what do I want? That is what makes me come alive.
yeah. Shannon, and so tell us a little bit more. People who purchase this book also get a space
Mm.
in your Firestarter University, which goes alongside the launch of this book. What will that mean?
What I have learned is that you can practice this formula and read the book and just keep working at the formula to figure out what the fire is going to be in your life. It could be very big, it could be small, as long as it's meaningful to you. But without community, it is very difficult to do
Mm,
that. It is so important to have the support of other women. And, Moms to Man Action obviously is the largest women-led nonprofit in the nation, but it's also, I would argue, the world's largest real-life laboratory for figuring out what lights women up. They'll
mm,
come into the organization and maybe it's because their kid had to endure a lockdown drill and they suddenly, in the support of other women, realize, oh, I have these abilities that are valuable. I have these values that are my North Star. I have these desires that doing this in conjunction with other women can help me fulfill. And so I want to get women together in a community to actually go through the book together in real life and work on
mm.
the exercises and learn from each other. And then women will be, who I interview for the book, will be part of the process. So when you pre-order, you'll be enrolled in Firestarter University. And we already have hundreds and hundreds of women signed up. So it is a very robust community, and I'm really, really excited about it.
And I can't wait for it. And Shannon, you are unbelievably good at rallying the army of angry women. And you've done that for Moms Demand Action. You've done that for Zoom calls to elect Kamala Harris. You've shown this so many times. So I'm really excited about this. And I'm excited for all our listeners to buy the book and sign up for this because from personal experience, from starting She Can, from having 500 women role models on here now and millions of listeners, it really is, there is so much in that, in those numbers and in those personal experiences that are also so collective.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, Shannon, what kind of a leader do you feel you are, or do you want to be going forwards?
I have certain personalities, traits. For example, I would argue that I'm pretty relentless and indefatigable. When I set my mind on something, it's very difficult to get me to focus on anything else. Part of that is having ADHD my whole life, untreated ADHD. And I'm really good at hyper focusing on something that is so important to me. And that's how I was able to do this, 7 days a week for 11 years. I think also that it's really important to recognize that people who come in to help you build something, you have to trust them and you have
Mm,
to get to yes as opposed to no so that they feel like their skills and their ideas are being valued because no one wants to work in a community where someone is very top down and not bottom up. I think that is also the secret sauce for activism. If you don't have enough top down, it's chaos, but if you don't have enough bottom up, it's too controlling. And so always finding that balance, and that's always my goal as a leader.
mm,
um, and I also think that I am a fighter, that at heart I get very angry about injustice and I try to use that anger for righteousness, but it certainly is the passion that fuels everything I do. And I think going forward, I I love to encourage other women to be leaders, in whatever way they lead that is unique to
Mm,
them. But just the amount of women I talk to who say, I have a great idea, but I'm not the right person, or no one wants to hear my story, or I don't know enough, or I'm not ready. I mean, all the reasons we delay doing the
mm,
things that we want to do in our lives as women because ultimately we're afraid of failure. And I just want to encourage women to fly the plane as they build it, to not wait. Because if you wait too long, you get to the end of your life and you haven't tried the things that are important to you. You don't know what's important to you. I want women to do those things simultaneously. And the last thing I would say about that is when I interviewed the over 70 women for this book, I would ask them all, what are you worried your deathbed regret will be?
mm,
And almost all of them said that my children will feel I focus too much on the things that were important to me and not enough on them.
mm.
This is not something you hear from dads.
No.
It is very intrinsic and built into us. We were talking about the system before. It's like the system sets up barriers, and then when we believe them, we have these barriers that we set up inside ourselves. I'm on the other side of that chasm. My youngest is 24. And when I ask my kids, what do they remember or how do they feel about how busy I was with Moms Demand Action, they don't say, oh, I can't believe you didn't go to that soccer game in
Mm,
2006. Or I can't believe you didn't go to the fifth showing of my Peter Pan play. What they all say is, I'm so grateful you had something in your life other than just focusing on me.
mm.
Thank you for being a role model and setting an example. And now we feel like we can do the same.
Yeah,
It is possible to parent and still do things you're passionate about.
yeah. Amazing, Shannon. So, what top tips would you give to younger women who are listening to this thinking, I've got this idea. I wanna, how am I gonna start? How do we start?
First of all, I talk to a lot of women and including young women who have all these expectations on them. And what I've noticed, it's really interesting. A lot of immigrant women, especially,
Mm,
their parents brought them to this country and they have these huge expectations like you will be a doctor, you will be a lawyer, you will be an engineer. And it's so much pressure. And then what happens is if you end up following a pursuit that you believe is a passion just because, your parents or your family members have told you it is, you will find yourself unhappy and
definitely.
unfulfilled if it is not something you are truly passionate about yourself. And I interview a lot of women in the book, and they say, I went all the way down the road of 7 years of medical school and dropped out a year before I graduated because I realized this was my parents' dream or this was someone
Mm,
else's dream. It wasn't what I wanted. And that's a real inflection point. And some of that can be avoidable if you are asking yourself as a girl, as a woman, what do I want? What is it really that is going to light me up in my life? And how do I get to that? What are the different things I can do? And I give so many stories and examples of the steps women can take to unearth, first of all, to know what they want, to pursue it, to get through what I call the messy middle. That's
mm,
that very difficult stretch between announcing what you want and achieving it.
yeah.
And I follow so many women who say, I almost gave up or I did give up and here's how I came back. And then at the very end, to figure out how to come together with like-minded women, because the reality is, just like Moms Demand Action, just like writing this book, nothing should last a lifetime. You should move on to new and different chapters. And so, how do you hand that over the
Mm,
best way possible? So, this formula that I lay out, identifying and then marrying your values, your abilities, and desires, anyone can do that at any age.
yeah. Shannon, so what do you feel are your challenges now? How do you have any challenges?
Oh, of course, I have many challenges. I think when we talk about living on fire, which is sort of a metaphor for figuring out two things, what's limiting you and what's calling you, right? We always have both of those things going on in our lives. And in order to, as I call it, live on fire, we have to be very clear about where we are in our lives and where we're going. And, I don't always know that. I talked a lot about adult friendship because fires can be personal, political, or professional.
Yeah.
And for me personally, I spent so much energy and time focused on Moms Demand Action.
Mm,
Even though it was the largest women-led organization in the nation, I did not have a lot of close girlfriends. I
Mm,
kind of woke up at age 50 realizing I've been so focused on work and family that I hadn't made time for friends.
yeah.
And I write about this on my Substack, which is I went on a whole process. I read all these books about how do you make friends, how do you find friends, how do you keep friends, and that's sort of an ongoing project in my life because I don't want to get to a point where I need my own support system
Mm.
and I don't have it. And so I think that's an interesting side project I have going on, which is just figuring out, okay, like who am I as a friend? How do I find the people who I resonate with and how can I build that into my life so that it's a priority?
Yeah, beautiful. So, what would you say are you most proud of to date?
Oh, well, personally, I've raised five independent kids who are out there doing great things in the world. And I mentioned my first marriage failed, but I'm very happily married again to the love of my life, which is wonderful. Politically, I love helping inspire and encourage women to run for office. I
Yeah.
think there's a moral imperative right now, especially in this country. Um, and that doesn't mean Congress or president. That means all levels from school board to city council, et cetera. And professionally, I'm really proud of the fact that Moms to In Action passed over 500 good gun laws across the country, that we passed the first
Mm.
federal gun safety legislation in a generation, that it's still going and thriving after I left, and that I'm moving on to new and different things. And as I said, I just feel like at 54, I'm sort of just getting started.
Yeah, it sounds incredible and so inspiring when you speak. So,
Oh.
Shannon, what would you say are your plans and goals for the next years? I understand that you don't even know maybe where this journey is going. If I listen to you, I think you have to run for office because it's inevitable. And we need women like yourselves who are the ones who can rally enough people around for the right things. And there is a right and wrong. And so we need people who understand that and who have the skills and the values, abilities, and desires that you clearly have. And we need them
Mm.
to we need you to step into the ring and go for it in my mind, but of course you're going to figure that out. Do you have any plans and goals other than of course bringing out this book, going on your book course around America and talking about this, doing your the university where you're going to teach women over the course of a year? What else is there that we don't know
Oh,
don't know yet?
it's a great question. My husband has a saying, which is let the game come to you. I
Mm.
think sometimes if we try to get too planned and too forced, then we end up doing something we didn't necessarily want to do. So I think my strategy is I'm going to let the book come out. I'm actually moving to the state of Florida, which is going to be an interesting journey for me. And once I get there, kind of give it a few months to settle in and see what happens. Let the game come to me. I'm excited about whatever's next, whatever's down the road. And this book sort of gives it, I think, a good jumping off point and a platform for whatever is next.
Shannon, I usually ask everyone now, as we live in these times, what message they would have for their government. I'm not going to ask you that because you've made that very clear over a long period of time. But if you had one message for, all the people in this world, if you maybe had a postcard and you would write a postcard to 7 billion people, what message would
Mm.
it say on there?
That cynicism, hopelessness, helplessness, those are an excuse for inaction.
Mm.
I am proof positive that one person with an idea can make a change. That is the beauty of living in what has heretofore been a democracy. And none of us can afford to sit on the sidelines, whether it's gun violence or any issue in this country. Alice Walker, the author, says, activism is the rent I pay to live on the planet. And I do think it's important that we find a piece of the work that we're passionate about, again, using your own values, abilities, and desires, and stick with it. Because, I think a sick democracy is like a sick child. If you have a kid who has the flu and at 3 a.m. you've been up with them all night and you don't look at them and say, I'm really exhausted. I'm going to bed. Good luck with whatever's going on here. I hope to see you on the other side.
Mm.
You stay in there, no matter how tired you are, no matter how hard it is, no matter how much you want to go to bed, you hold their hand until they're better. And I think a democracy is the same way, that we are fortunate and blessed to live in a country that has a promise it hasn't quite lived up to, but we can make that so. And so I just would encourage everyone to not be cynical
Mm.
or hard-hearted, but to be open and hopeful. And that is a practice. It is a discipline.
Yeah, and it's something everybody can do. Shannon, you are an amazing role model. I'm so excited to have you on She Can. I am so excited that you're outlining what's limiting us and what's calling us, and for giving us the impetus to think about that. What are our values, abilities, and desires? I'm excited to read your book. I'll definitely be part of this university program, and I'm so excited to see for what you're going to do next. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, it was wonderful. Thank you.